Namaskar to all the audience and the community members. So, friends, after having a very insightful informational session on the US presidential election, when the whole astrology community was also divided, people were like rooting for like Donald Trump, there were like people who were rooting for Kamala Harris, and a lot of the astrologers were staying diplomatic. It's just like that, right at that time, amidst all that confusion, Christina, who's our guest today as well. She came and she gave her clear verdict, her very precise calculation and observation that she actually gave it a clear answer that okay, Donald Trump is gonna be standing a very very strong chance, and based on all the calculation on which we have had our discussion. She's a very valuable member of my community. We keep on sharing notes and discussing on different sutras and everything, and it's just like that today on a Friday at a time when we are doing this session. So today Christina is again going to be presenting her observation on Venus, like a planet which is very important for lot many people. We all want wealth, we all want love in the life and all. So today she'll be explaining her observation, her findings, her research on the metamorphosis of Venus. We will be discussing some points on astronomical significance as well. But yes, if you will be sticking around, because this is a presentation which is coming from a proper, authentic, credible Vedic astrologer. So now the whole stage to Christina.
Thank you, Nipun. And thank you everyone for watching this video. I know last time we were talking about something very political, which is not normally my forte. I just thought it would be a really good opportunity to share, something that we should do as astrologers, which is be impartial to the evidence that we're given, because most of the times we're kind of like sleuths, we're like trying to figure out an answer. And if you're very like eighth house motivated like me, or you like to really get into the research of things, sometimes it can get really, controversial, right? So let's talk about something a little bit more interesting and beautiful. And, part of our tradition is observing the planets. And, a lot of times this is not a part of many people's experience with Jyotish. They want to just go into the charts. But this is how our ancients did it. They would go outside and sit under the stars and feel the energy of the planets. And I think this is something that's very valuable in our experience today, because we have so many tools, we have so many observatories, even with the naked eye. It was important for me to get this presentation out today, because there's going to be some really great opportunities to see Venus in the sky. And, being Jyotishis, we can just pull up the Panchang and see, okay, it's going to be this close to moon. So we can go outside tonight and just look right by the moon and know that that's Venus, or know that that's Saturn, or know that that's Jupiter. And when we have these experiences, it brings something into us, some kind of divine knowledge and wisdom that you can't get from any book, that you can only get through your experience. And that kind of taps into our more intuitive part of, Jyotish. That is also, I think, something very valuable for each of our community members to kind of, figure out how to tune into it. So first of all, I'm not an astronomer, but I wanted to give a presentation on something I myself always wanted to learn. So this was a good learning experience for me too, because I think this will be valuable for everyone. We can see what really is going on with Venus. And then towards the end, we'll have like a little discussion. We can share some stories and observations that we have. So for my presentation today, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can just get into the topic. Let's see if we can see here. All right. All right. Is that visible there?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about Venus, the metamorphosis from the morning star to the evening star. And I just have my website here on the bottom, and also Instagram and YouTube. I'll be slowly adding to it. So, and my username is Lunar Mysticism Vidya. And I am returning this year as a Parashara conference faculty. And last year, I actually spoke about Venus and the more tantric side of Venus. So I'll be presenting that soon, maybe within the next month. So you can email me or send me a message on Instagram if you're interested in that, and I'll put it together for everyone. So today, we're going to be talking about where does the idea of Venus as a morning star and evening star originate? So this image here is, oftentimes we hear about the pentagram of Venus, right? Or we hear about the flower of Venus, and this is where it comes from. This is basically its transit mapped out, and it makes this pentagram. Now, the Venus cycle is an astrological phenomenon that was studied and documented by the Toltecs and the Mayans, the natives of Mexico. Now, the Toltecs were a civilization that have many similarities to our ancient Vedic civilization. Now, this is something I thought you would really like, Nipun, because you love Tula Rashi. So, fun fact, the Toltec capital city was actually named Tula. And when I saw this, I thought, whoa, there's way more to this than we even know, because there's so little information about the Toltecs. They were like this ancient civilization, but their capital, Tula, was actually described as a paradise where mastery of arts and sciences took place. So this is something I found right in the beginning of my research, that I thought this shows the interconnection of our ancient civilizations and how sky watching was so important for the people. Now, Venus in the Toltec civilization was called, now I'm not going to try and pronounce these names because they're a little bit hard. But from what I heard, it's called Citlalipol, which means the great star. And it's also called Totonometal, which is the burning arrow. So these are two names that were mentioned in their ancient texts for Venus. Now, their ancient creation story is called the Popol Vuh, and it details the metamorphosis of Venus from morning star to evening star, personified as two twins. The first one is Quetzalcoatl, which a lot of people might have heard this name if you know anything about, Latin American lore. This is a very big deity. Now, he was the morning star and the guardian of the day, and his twin, Tezcatlipoca, was the evening star and the guardian of the night. Now, the imagery here on the right is actually a combined image of the two brothers intertwined here. And Venus was also in their ancient text personified as a male god who was a valiant and expert warrior that battled the sun god. Now, this is an interesting astronomical story which illustrates the yearly movements and conjunctions of the sun with Venus. Now, they saw this as a battle that happened every year. The visibility of Venus, particularly its appearance in the early morning sky, was interpreted as a sign of renewal and prosperity, manifesting the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth to the Toltecs. Now, this was really central to their philosophy of life. They always viewed everything kind of in a Trimurti, how we see as Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. They saw the same thing in their belief system. Now, the movements of Venus were also seen as omens of drought, danger, or warfare. And they also looked to Venus and cataloged Venus as the signal of the beginning of the raining season. Now, some interesting things that I also found from my research. Now, everybody might remember in 2012, a lot of people were predicting the end of the world based on the Mayan calendar. Now, these pictures are actually pictures of the Mayan calendar that survive. These two sections here that are lit up, the blue and the red, are detailing part of the Venus almanac, which shows that the omen for these dates were separated by an 8-year cycle. And it even tells you how to read the codex based on their system. They have a numerical system, and then they also have a day, a month, a year, and then a great year. Now, the omen for this year of 2012 was misfortune and the end of the rulers. So this is where people got this end of the world. What's even more interesting that I think was slightly overlooked is 8 years later, in 2020, on the date of June 2020, this is according to the Mayan calendar, Venus was dawning on a day of misfortune and the end of the rulers. And when did that happen? That happened during our pandemic. So they actually were pretty spot on with predicting some kind of end of world and end of rulers, because what happened at this time was a lot of governments started clamping down on people, and now we're seeing that ruler class start to collapse as a result of this Venus cycle here. So this image here shows the Venus cycle, and I'll explain that shortly. So in the Dresden Codex, which is the name of the ancient Toltec and Mayan books, there's actually 6 pages solely dedicated to Venus. And we know that 6 in our numerology actually corresponds to Shukra. So there's something else there that's kind of tied in with this ancient civilization. And these 6 pages describe the personification of the planet, the damage of its rays, and the 5 faces, which are called the synodic cycle, which is what this whole talk really was about. Is what are these 5 petals of Venus, or what is the Venus pentagram about, and how they're completed in an 8-year cycle. Now, we see that cycle here happening with its transition from evening star, which is 263 days, then 50 days in what they called the underworld, and then 263 days as the morning star. This gives us the calculation of 584 days to orbit the sun. And we know that to be true in our calculations even today. And it appears this way for us from Earth. So that's what this perspective is. It's perspective from Earth. So let's see if this video works. I have a little video that kind of shows how this happens. And if you look at the imagery, that little white is Venus and the yellow is the sun. So
Okay.
it's this dance that happens between Venus and the sun that gives this effect of this flower, what they call the flower of Venus or the petal. Now, what's also interesting is it maps this synodic cycle from 2016 to 2023. 2023 was the end of an 8-year period. So if we look back in time and we see the ending of these synodic cycles of these 8-year periods, there is some kind of transformation that happens in the collective, which we also know in our Jyotish Shastras that the number 8 relates to the 8th house, which is our house of transformation. Oh, okay, here we go. So this is the Venus cycle for 2025. And this image just shows what the astronomical points are. And it shows in the evening sky, the perspective from Earth, where the sun is at, and then the what they call the elongations. So it's when Venus gets furthest from the sun, and we know this because we also study this in Jyotish Shastra, and then when it gets furthest from the sun in the eastern direction and the western direction. Now, for this year, the evening star Venus is going to be visible in February in the southwest sky, and then in the west direction after mid-February. So Venus then goes below the horizon for 8 days, March 13th through 25th. And in Jyotish, we know this as Shukra Mudam. I think I said that right. Um, and this is the time when it is considered inauspicious to perform any kind of rituals. And this is also the time when the ancients viewed this as Venus going into the underworld. Now, March 18th through 21st, we're going to have a visibility of Venus, which is called a dual visibility, which is a kind of rare experience. Venus will be visible in both the morning and the evening sky for a few days in the northern latitude. Now, the western elongation is when Venus becomes a morning star. It begins again to rise 323 and reappears with its full brightness in April. Now, a small note is these elongations, or the greatest elongations of Venus, they occur roughly every 9 months. And in Jyotish, we know these greatest elongations as the furthest point of where Venus can get from the sun, because they often travel, together. They get close and then they separate. So this is in astronomical terms called an elongation. And we have these three elongations here. January 10th was the greatest elongation, and it was visible in the evening. March 23rd, they call this an inferior conjunction, which is another visibility point. And then June 1st is the greatest elongation, when we can see Venus in the morning. And here's just an image of, kind of how to observe Venus. And we know February 1st is coming up very quickly. And there's some websites I put here, like earthsky.org, Starwalk, hindupad.com. They talk about this Mudami, and they give the dates for Venus and Guru. But this observation on the 1st is going to be a really beautiful observation, because we'll be able to see Venus in a very kind of brilliant light next to the moon. And yeah, so that's the end of my presentation here. So maybe now we can just kind of share some stories and talk about some observations that you
Yeah,
might
Krishna, what do you call that? Let me sorry. Yeah, it was insightful actually. It's like looking at it and the correspondence with different civilization and all.
have.
See, this thing because we have had a discussion on that as well. Like, I prefer to doing even the beach mantras and the chanting even at a time when either that star is visible or it is the hora of that planet. So like initially, like for a while. I was also doing the beach mantra chanting for the Venus, and I used to like I prefer to do that in the evening because from my balcony, I can see the evening star like Venus over there. So I even have an app. I can see okay now Venus is like visible. Okay, now let me start my practice and all. So yeah, it's like
Yeah.
if you're like so much absorbed into astronomy, into planets and the stars. Like for me, sometimes I do not even have to give attention to what is the time. I just keep observing the position of the sun because the way I make my videos, I get the natural light from the sun. Okay,
Yeah.
the sun is there, it must be three. Oh, moon is this, it must be in this phase. Oh, Venus is here. So this is what, the way we have the passion for our field with the
Hmm.
stars and all. And that's the reason when you mentioned this thing about the metamorphosis, I was like, okay, let me bring you on board and let's have a discussion on that. Right.
Thank you. Yeah, and I was always fascinated by this, because it's not just in Toltec lore. I just share about this because actually my first guru that I had was actually Toltec, and he could trace his lineage all the way back to this civilization. But he never really spoke too much. He was one of those very silent type of energies, but he would always encourage me, just look into it more, because I'd always ask him, how are these pantheons connected? How is Hinduism connected to Mexico? And I actually was telling you a little bit before we started recording. So yesterday I had this really kind of random interaction, but we know things aren't always random, because this is how the information comes to
Comes
us.
to us. Yes.
Uh, so I was telling you, I just finished reading this book about Ravana, and I felt like I had this whole new perspective of Ravana, his family, like the whole civilization at that time. I got a better understanding of even his wife, because you never really hear anything about his wife. You just hear about Ravana and how he was this bad guy and, all these things. So I'm having this conversation with this older Gujarati man who I just met yesterday, and he gives me his kundali, and I notice he's wearing a ring on his finger here.
Okay,
And
okay,
it
okay.
was so sparkly and brilliant. And I said, "Is that a ring for Shukra?" And he just looked at me and he says, "Yes. How do you know?" And I said, "I don't know. I just felt it." And then he shows me his kundali, and I was like, "Of course, right? He has two planets conjunct Shukra." And then we start talking about Jyotish, and he says, um, I think her name is Mandodari,
Manoj.
Ravana's wife.
Yes,
He
yes.
says, she's actually from Mexico. And I said, I always felt there was this interconnection between Mexico and India. And he actually told me a story that he had heard a long time ago from one of his Jyotish gurus. He said that during the time of the Mahabharata, we all know the story about how the clans spread out through the world. And I think now we're starting to get more information about where these clans went, because according to this guy, a clan went to Mexico. And there's this other guy, Nilesh Oak. I don't know if you know him.
I guess I've heard his name. Yes, yes.
He's been telling a lot of doing a lot of talks about astronomy and about the Mahabharata, how this time is older than we think. But he also did this deep dive on South America and Mexico, and how they actually found this glyph of Indra in the mountains of Peru. And the local people worshipped a deity very similar to Indra. So there's another connection there to like South America and Mexico, to our, Jyotish Shastras. So, we all think that we're like different, but really we're all coming from this really ancient tradition of people that are really trying to I feel like we're trying to remember this way of living. And I think we can do that through Jyotish, like you say, sitting outside or sitting and just observing the planets, being quiet and being still within ourselves. We can really learn a lot about these, mysterious bodies, right? That are controlling our lives, right? But they're also giving us a lot of knowledge, and we're just playing it all out through our birth chart, right?
And Krishna, what I lately felt is that, like lot many people talk about that when it comes down to people who become very successful, big politicians and all, like lot many people have been only giving attention to like Sun, to Saturn. People say Rahu, but you would be surprised when I did my research in lot many charts. This could be that French, like Macron and so many politicians. It's the Venus. I actually saw Venus as a pattern. And see, I'm just giving you a sneak peek. I'll be making a video on the Saturn only, and I'll be talking about the charts of the Vivek Ramaswamy, Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel, and all of
Oh,
that. So
cool.
Venus, yeah, Venus. Even before preparing for this session, I was like working on the charts only. So I mean to say, Venus is important. People feel that okay, Venus can only give you like luxury or artistic creative talents. Even in order for someone to become a very big diplomat, become a very successful politician, have those powerful connections. See what is happening in the US. Like all those politicians, okay, Donald Trump come, all of his loyal people with whom he has good relation and network, they are being appointed. When it was Joe Biden, he was appointing his network people. So Venus is actually very important even in order for someone to reach the scale the heights in their career. So Venus is important.
Yes. Yes, and this is something I talked about a little bit in the conference this year. I talked about how Venus is actually a diplomat.
Yes.
And when you look at these charts of people like Putin, right? He has a very prominent Venus. Venus plays a huge role. That's why I thought it was really important to share this information about, how the Toltecs viewed Venus as a warrior, because we know what is the symbol of Venus when it comes to like the Dasha avatar of Vishnu, right? It's Lord Parusharam.
Yeah. Yes.
He's not like a woman like putting on makeup. He's a guy that's out to get bring a balance with Dharma. And it was not pretty.
And I guess in this regard, even the Shukracharya, like Shukracharya,
Yeah.
he has that upper edge even over the Brahaspati, that he has got that Sanjeevni Vidya, and the way he was like, we can say this thing that he was like he favored even the downtrodden, like demons, any heed, any attention. He was the one who was even empathetic towards them. So yeah, it's like Venus is like very important, very, very important.
Right, right. Yeah, I like how you said that because really, this is what I've discovered. I really enjoy researching Venus a lot, and I really enjoy studying Tantra personally. So when I look at what Venus really is, when we think about in our Jyotish Shastras, it's never said it's this beautiful woman that, like the way the Western perspective is, it's said he is Daitya Guru. He is a tantric.
Yeah.
He's going to do all the crazy stuff that he can possibly do to get that Sanjeevani.
And
He
I
has that determination. This is why these world leaders rise, because they're not going to let anyone stop them from getting what they want, right? But there are certain things that need to be done. They need to humble themselves, right? To get to that position. Maybe they're not humble now as we see them because they've achieved that, but there has to be some level of submission to a guru because that's part of the story of Shukracharya as well. He had to go to different gurus to finally find the one that said, you know what? You need to worship Mahadev. The only person that can give you what you're looking for is Mahadev. And through that experience, then he becomes the counselor of, like you're saying, the downtrodden people, maybe the people that we would call like rejected now, maybe the
rejected ones.
people,
Yes,
yeah,
that modern
the
day
people
context.
that everybody would say, you know what, you're not really fit for this path of, studying Jyotish. Okay, well, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to go find a guru that's going to teach me, and I'm going to become the best Jyotishi. I'm going to have a great following of people. This is the type of determination that Shukracharya can inspire in people. And I think it's very relevant actually in our time because there's a lot of people that look at the world in a way of this is good and this is bad. But this is not really the Vedic perspective. The Vedic perspective shows that there's a nuance to all characters, that we all have the ability to be great people even if we have I don't believe there's a bad chart. I don't believe there's a good chart. I think that every chart is beautiful, every chart is unique. I think we all have special qualities that we bring into the world. But when we want to see what our specialty is, when it comes to the Venus, for example, because we're talking about Venus, you just have to look at your life and what you want and then pull those energies from that Venus, right? Find a way to, like how you say, extract out the things from Venus, find a way to relate to that Venus and find a way to really kind of, you know, submit yourself, humble yourself, and then be able to receive the knowledge so that you can become maybe one day the person that you want to become.
And Christian, on this only because lately I've been like reading a lot about the like Ayurveda, different like Ida, Pingla, Sushmana, different chakras. I've been talking lately, reading a lot about it, and I'm telling you, it's like Venus is generally connected with the heart chakra. Like people who are able to outgrow a unproductive cycle in their life, like we keep on coming across those people, irrespective of the fact they are talented, they're still stuck in a loop and they are not contented, they are not able to turn around their life, they're not able to manifest things. So Venus, just because it is connected with the heart chakra, so only that feel factor, that love factor, we say that all the bottom things like in the life, like driven by fear, driven by need, can only be controlled and subjugated through that love, which actually Venus represents. Like goddess Lakshmi is connected with Venus. Unless and until you do not have a strong Venus, you do not even have that capacity to enjoy that pleasure. So yes, Venus strengthened is very important, and I'm so glad that we are talking on a Friday about it.
Yes, that's a beautiful point. I really have to say I have been enjoying how you are tying in the more esoteric things. And this point about the heart chakra and Ayurveda. Ayurveda is also the domain of Shukra. This
Yeah.
is something that I've seen. I studied Ayurveda as well. This is part of my path is I actually took a full practitioner as far as I could here in the United States. We were talking about Agori, right? The
Yeah.
Robert Svoboda book. And I actually started reading that when I was beginning my Ayurveda school. And I thought, wow, this is so cool. I'm reading a book by like a Western guy that studied Ayurveda. Like,
See, I'm doing, you see,
you know,
Krishna, I'm so sorry I'm interrupting you. It's like
oh, that's okay.
my attention span in the book reading is very bad. I have a very bad attention span. That was the only book for trilogy, which actually gave me that thrill and excitement. The much, it's like I'm watching Game of Thrones or something. Like
Yeah.
Agora trilogy and the Greatness of Saturn. These are the like
Yes.
books written by Dr. like Robert Svoboda is like mind blowing. There's no comparison to them. Agora is
Hmm.
amazing.
Well, that's probably because he had a tantric guru and he found a
Oh
way
yes,
to write a
Vimlananda,
book.
Vimlananda.
Yes, and this is another power of Shukra. I mean, I could talk about Shukra all day and his tantric gifts, but I think really why a lot of people gravitate towards those books is because part of the powers of Shukra is what we call mesmerizing, right? The ability to kind of like get people fixated and obsessed with your book, right? Like you want to read. I read that book so quick. I was just like, there's another one? Whoa. And I personally thought the second one was better because it was more about like the ritual and stuff. So I was like, oh my gosh, there's another book. But this is just, the appeal of really when you start to understand, how Ayurveda ties into Jyotish, how our ancients had this whole system that worked out together, and then, I feel like your Ayurveda is going to be so easy for you to understand because you already understand Jyotish. It's just like the next step of like putting that together, and when you talk about Venus and the heart chakra, actually in Ayurveda, we learn that Ojas, right? We know that Ojas is the life force, right? Have you heard this word Ojas?
Yes, yes, yes,
Yes.
yes,
So Ojas is nothing but Shukra, right?
yes.
And Shukra and Ojas are interchangeable, but when we learn the location of where Ojas is seated, it's in the heart. And if you know that, you can kind of really understand the nuance of what Shukra is, on the deeper levels. It is this contentment, right? The ability to feel that, that happiness. And if you don't have the ability to feel happiness, how can you experience love, right?
Yeah, because Krishna, that's what I'm telling you. Because I have like I've been doing consultations for a long time now, and just like that, when you come across like people, their like charts, their situation, irrespective of the fact that okay, there's one way of looking at it. Okay, your dasha is also promising a marriage. Jupiter, Venus in the transit is also promising it. So there's something wrong. Why still it is not giving result? Then you have to dive into that. Okay, their thought process, their power for manifestation, are they are in which chakra they are like rooted, what kind of commands they are giving in the universe. So all of that blend into it. So I guess that is the only reason. And yeah, that is the only reason. And Venus is something like which is very very important. I'm telling you, in the modern day and age, like no matter what people say, that even for like even for you to do the perform the religious austerities and something, you still need that money. Whatever life gives you, in order for you to feel contented with it, be happy with it. So for happiness, Venus is important. So yes, Venus is
Right.
really there.
Right. And I think our rishis definitely knew what they were doing. There's a reason why certain rituals are not performed when Venus is not visible,
Yes, very good.
right? And even marriage, a lot of people in the West, they never look at a chart. They never look at a panchang. And I'm like, how do people do this? How do they get married on a Saturday, right? Almost all American marriages are on Saturday. I'm like, unless you love Saturn, unless you get Saturn,
No, but
maybe
see,
it'll work out.
then the marriage will not be like on not be relying on the love. It will be more on the need of the security and something. It will be just the social conduct and just the security. But we need love, right? For the
Right,
this is
right. So
important.
maybe we could put that out there for our American viewers. Even if you're not looking at the panchang and you want to get married, just do it on a Friday.
Well, thanks, Rishi.
Yeah.
It was a very like worthwhile session, and yeah, I'll look forward to that next time as well. We'll be doing some more insightful discussion, and all that thing which we discussed. of the topic. We can even blend it and structure it into a discussion, connecting astrology, putting case studies, reference chart, so that our audience are gonna be finding it more informational. But yeah,
Yeah, of course.
thanks a lot for coming, and I'm sure that our audience is gonna enjoy this session on Venus. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Namaste.
Bye.